I wanted to talk to you about something I felt like I had a great deal of expertise in, and I kept coming back to awkwardness of all things. So I'm going to talk to you about awkwardness, starting with my personal experience with the subject. Age 1, I was born with a condition called pigeon toe, otherwise known as false clubfoot. My parents thought I might have the condition for the rest of my life with my feet facing inward. I was very fortunate I grew out of it. Age 13, I had braces. They came off, and then I actually had to get them a second time. There was also a third brace, a night brace with a thin metal wire that went around the circumference of my head. I was as tall as I am now, 5 feet 10 inches tall, but I was only 13, and I was bad at sports, all sports, especially basketball. So in that ungraceful, gamely sense of the word, awkward was a perfect fit. Here I am at age 15, the tall one in the knee-high striped socks. Being in this punk ska band, the Shady Characters, gave me a chance to articulate my misfit status with a sense of pride. When I first got to college, I thought I would break out of my shell, be more social. I went to the University of Pittsburgh, and the Steelers were playing the Super Bowl. I remember the night the team won, I was alone. I actually didn't know it was the Super Bowl at all. I was alone in my dorm, and I was looking out a window at my peers, and they were setting fire to trash cans and flipping over cars. There were policemen and police dogs right outside the window, and I just felt really kind of scared. So I do what I do when I feel alienated. I kind of hole away in my room and make things. I wrote and recorded 12 songs that year. The songs were about loneliness and isolation, unrequited love. I created an album out of that, and I, in a moment of boldness, sent it to a record label, and they actually accepted it. It was called Something About Violence, and it was well received, but reviews made sure to point out my awkwardness. So Pitchfork commented on my fragile emotional state. Other reviews said, her songs remind you that often the greatest moments in your life are those that you cringe to remember. So this was not an escape from awkwardness. This was an awkward autobiography. I just want to take a second and question the assumption of the narrative that I've presented so far, which is that the awkward person is the minority. The braces, being bad at sports, taking refuge in music and the arts. These experiences are ordinary, normal even. So if it's normal to feel awkward, if that's something we share, why do so many of us have this painful, chronic sense of not fitting in? Growing up, I consumed 4 to 6 hours of television, Hollywood movies, and advertising every single day. Hollywood movies had these slick, successful heroes who had simple stories and made life look totally easy. They got it covered. On the other hand, reality shows had real people, yes, but they were lining up to be humiliated for a second on the screen. I saw a lot of people in real life whose stories just weren't being told. I wondered, what's wrong with us? What do we need to buy or buy into to be worthy of representation? When I discovered independent films and documentaries, I felt so relieved. I saw real stories and complex characters with inner psychological struggles and struggles against society. We're constantly being bombarded by mixed messages about what success means, how to love and be loved, how to be a worthwhile human being. And these films represented that struggle to me and made me feel so much less alone, and they made me want to tell real stories. I had no idea how to do that, so I, on a shoestring budget, got a Handycam, which is like equipped to make home movies, and started filming people who intrigued me. A lot of artists, so there were painters, musicians, poets, comedians. And as I started to collect their stories, I noticed commonalities, and one is that a lot of creative people operate without certain societal safety nets. A lot of artists are part-time, freelance, non-traditional workers, often adjunct professors who you might have, who don't have access to things like health care because their jobs don't provide it for them. So I started to ask them not only about their creative work and their philosophies, but also about being uninsured and underinsured in America, which is the only industrialized country that does not provide universal health care as a human right. It was called Healthy Artists, and it started very grassroots here in Pittsburgh, but it kind of resonated nationally. The New York Times said the series posed a challenge to the notion that artists must suffer outside the basic economic protections of society. I couldn't stop making documentaries. I just want to keep making more. This one's called Street Doctor. I followed around Pittsburgh physician Jim Withers as he dressed like a homeless man and went into the streets at night, hoping to blend in with people who were sleeping under bridges and on the stoops of churches. And he did this because he wanted to provide them with medical care that they desperately needed but were too scared to seek out. He risked being ostracized by the entire medical institution to do this really unconventional work, but he persevered and he did it for over 20 years. He's now widely regarded as one of the founders of the international street medicine movement. It was such an honor to film him, and this little 5-minute video we made ended up getting 500,000 views on YouTube in a week and even raised some money for his program, which is great. This one's called The Faster. That's Cheney Lewis. He's a UPMC hospital worker who gave up food for 7 days straight to protest for a living wage because for the past 9 years he's been working at UPMC Hospital making less than $12 an hour. Meanwhile, the CEO makes $6 million a year and has a private jet. And the hospital's supposed to be a charitable nonprofit. I was really moved that Cheney wanted to address economic inequality through such a personal, physical sacrifice and wanted to make this film. These are all very different stories, but one thing stories tend to have in common is they have protagonists, they have heroes, and everyone has a very different definition of what a hero is, what a hero looks like, who deserves attention, who deserves a place on the screen. This is David Matthews. He's a writer and an artist, and one day out of the blue, I got a Facebook message from him saying, "I've seen your documentaries, and I think you should make one about me." For 20 years, he's posted personal ad flyers around telephone poles in Pittsburgh looking for love. And his flyers have wacky headlines and personal information about his life and just these odd pictures of himself. And he's been posting them for so long because this is before online dating really took off, so options were really limited. And he gained a reputation in the art scene. People were like, "Who's that guy posting these flyers?" When I met him, he was now in his 40s and he was still looking for love, but he was now looking online. Something else had changed. He had just been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, a form of autism spectrum disorder, which is the fastest growing developmental disability in the United States. To give you some more information on that, so it's a spectrum, and you have severe autism on one hand, which includes symptoms such as communication impairment. Some people are even nonverbal. People experience sensitivity to stimulation, such as noise and light, which can make living in the world very difficult and painful even. With David, he has Asperger's, or high-functioning autism. So he's super intelligent and super just verbal, but he has a hard time with social things such as reading facial expressions and conversational cues. As a youth, he was hyperactive and he had a speech delay. So I met him at this point where he had just gotten this late-in-life diagnosis at 41. He was still looking for love, and we set out to make a film together. Here's the trailer.
You like to cuddle? Yes, I do. Don't let my sober facade fool you. Hello, my name is David Matthews. I'm an artist, a fiction writer, and a man with Asperger's syndrome. This is my coconut menagerie. Bought this one in 1995, the day before the O.J. Simpson trial verdict. My postcard collection, I like the Eastern European-ness of it.
Most kids try to fit in. He didn't really try to fit in. He just wanted to be himself.
He had the nicknames on campus. The one that stands out to me for whatever reason is people call him Squid Man.
I've been looking for love for a very, very long time. personal-led flyer ever. January 1995. Surrender today. Dating and/or friendship. Find Dave a date. Over the next 15 years, I posted hundreds of copies of personal-led flyers. A woman I know said I shouldn't post this photo because it makes me look scary to women. Stranded on my own mental island. I met someone on OkCupid. We'll see how that goes. Looks like the height of an endangered species.
I was immediately like, is he even capable of love? I mean, that hurt.
Sometimes I wish I were part of an old happily married couple. I don't know if that will ever happen. At least I lived my life the way I wanted to. Geekily.
I wouldn't be losing myself by degrees with every bed.
Ask Me Seeks Love is my first feature-length documentary. I spent over 3 years on it. I dove into directing it, shot 100 hours of footage, narrowed it down into a 75-minute film, did all the editing, and created half the soundtrack for it. I think when you've worked on something for that long and extensively, you have to take a step back and say, how did this all begin? How did I become so all about this project? So I wanted to answer that, and I found this clip from literally the first time I ever met David in person. Here's the clip.
It's hard to find a connection in Pittsburgh, notorious for its weak single scene. And I have to admit, I am a rarefied taste. I'm a spectacled ectomorph who uses $19 vocabulary words.
What's the priority? Is the first priority to literally get you dates? Or is the first priority to make an interesting film artistically?
Hard to say. I'd say a little of each.
Okay, so it's high.
Yes.
There's motives, okay.
I had the idea of including interviews of people I know in this movie. Sincere interviews, well, as sincere as possible.
It was David's sincerity that compelled me to make this movie. People with autism are often considered too sincere. Sometimes they don't want to make pleasantries. They can be very blunt and direct and honest. David is 100% authentically himself at all times, for better or worse, and that can lead to awkward situations. One thing this film has taught me is that awkwardness is a close companion to sincerity. It's the absence of slick, successful personas. When people lack these slick, successful personas in our culture, they can be in a lot of trouble. One survey showed that over 63% of people with autism had experienced bullying. I believe that stories and images are very powerful, and in this visual culture, we must work to give real people and their real stories a place on the screen if we're to empathize with each other in real life. David experienced bullying from his peers, mistreatment from his parents, and rejection from women. To me, he's heroic because he worked through so much of that to become a writer, an artist, and a kind human being with this dry intellectual sense of humor that's truly rare. He had so much pressure coming down on him to conform, but he maintained his sincerity. A worthy protagonist isn't someone who makes life look easy. It's someone who's honest about their struggles and willing to shine a light on the imperfect moments of their lives. It's someone who, like the rest of us, will face alienation and loneliness at times, but who will continue to pursue human connection. The stories that have inspired me the most aren't the ones that urge us to conform to this narrow set of marketable images. They're the stories that show us the beauty, complexity, and struggle of our real lived experiences. Next time you experience awkwardness in your own life, in someone else's story, or at the movies, I urge you to embrace it. Embracing awkwardness might be a step towards living a life of greater sincerity. Thank you.